Imagine a street. Dusty, abandoned, seemingly lifeless. On the surface, nothing special. Just another street on the outskirts of Ramadi. But those who know see it differently. These aren't just walls, they're traps. Not windows, but scopes. Not homes, but ambushes. And the scariest part, you never know when the silence will end. March of 2007. The border between the Mulaab and Al-Iskaan districts. After months of fighting and clearing operations, al-Qaeda militants in Iraq were cornered in their last hideout, a few blocks in the western part of the city. They were waiting for the Americans to loosen their grip so they could return and resume what they knew best: intimidation, killing, control. According to the plan, the area was to be cleared by Marines from 2nd Battalion, 5th Regiment. But their arrival was delayed. Meanwhile, the militants began showing signs of activity. Small-scale attacks, patrol ambushes, assaults on outposts. Their goal was clear. Don't let the Americans believe victory is close. The final straw came in early March. An anti-tank rocket struck a Baker Company patrol right at the border of the districts. Private Adrian Garcia, a recruit only 3 weeks into the war, lost both legs. After that, the commander, call sign Manchu 6, refused to wait. He reported to the brigade, "We're ready. We'll start the operation now. Just give the order." From that moment, preparations began. The first step was to establish control over key intersections along Easy Street, on the edge of Iskaan. It was a familiar tactic: hold, block the approaches, set barriers, isolate the zone. That's how Mulaab had been cleared, and that's exactly what they planned to repeat. March 20th, noon. One of the intersections, Easy Street and Park Place. A report. Engineers were called in. I was on the turret. Garcia was behind the wheel. We approached cautiously. Local soldiers flagged us down, pointing to where they believed the explosive was planted. The enemy had a habit, not planting just one, but several bombs in the same area. You find the first and think it's over, but the second is waiting for those who come to defuse the first. Garcia drove around the suspected device and moved ahead to cover the street from the front. We circled around it in a wide arc. Behind us came Sergeant Carter's truck, then the engineers, and bringing up the rear, Sergeant Clark's vehicle. This spot was often targeted. Fire usually came from here toward the Eagle's Nest position. I knew that. For months, I had imagined what was behind those walls. A den, the last stronghold, practically a fortress. But when I stood there in person, it was different. Empty. Quiet. Dust. Collapsed buildings. Like everywhere else. No finale, no battle, no movie scene. Just a street. And it was in that very moment, when I allowed myself to relax for the first time, that it happened. Explosion. No warning. No signs. Just silence, and then the hit. A shockwave ringing in my ears, dust in my face. Something heavy slammed into our armored vehicle. I held my breath to avoid swallowing the dust. In moments like that, you don't think. You just wait to see what comes next. It felt like it hit very close. "That was a hell of a blast," someone muttered. "Everyone okay?" Kazina called out. I checked the rear, nothing visible. The dust stood like a wall. "I don't see anyone." The radio came to life. Kazina shifted focus. I turned forward again, scanning sectors. That's when Garcia tugged on my pant leg. "Did you see that, Fletch?" "See what?" "The goddamn robot." "What?" The robot hit the vehicle. "Its arm flew off." Kazina cut in. It was an arm. It came off the chassis and fell in the road. I looked down. Sure enough, among the rubble and debris lay a twisted manipulator arm from the EOD robot. Like a toy someone had tossed aside. The world fell silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This silence knew what had just happened. It carried tension. "That was a command detonation," said Kazina. "Someone's watching us right now." I started scanning windows, rooftops. Cracks, gaps, emptiness. Everywhere. Not a single movement. Trying to find the trigger man who set the IED in a layout like this, it's like chasing a ghost in a maze. But inside, a strange caw. Not panic. Not fear. Just focus. Garcia turned again. "You get it, right? Someone was waiting for us. And almost got us." I nodded. We knew this was only the beginning. It was going to get worse, but no one planned to retreat. When the commander says, "We start now," there's almost no time to prepare. That's exactly what happened this time. The operation wasn't in the plans. Everything was decided quickly. The strike had to be sudden and decisive. The objective, to drive the militants out of al-Iskaan once and for all. This was their last position, their final stronghold. The operation was named Chickamauga, after one of the bloodiest battles of the U.S. Civil War. The name spoke for itself. No one had any illusions. It wouldn't be easy. The main assault force was Baker Company. It was their man, Garcia, who had been hit at the border with Mulaab. Now they were the ones pushing forward. It was only fair that the revenge was theirs to take. The company commander was home on leave. So command fell to his executive officer, Lieutenant Camp, the same officer who had only recently led a platoon. Now he was taking an entire company into a decisive attack. This was his battle. At the time, I didn't fully understand we were part of something big. For several nights leading up to the operation, we were firing illumination rounds, infrared, for night observation. I thought it was just routine support. Turned out, we were lighting the path for the assault. March 24th. The beginning of the attack. It started from the north, from Grid L1, near Market Street. The assault moved south across the whole district, all the way down to Grid P10. That's where, south of our position at Eagle's Nest, the heaviest fighting took place. The barriers separating Mulaab were still standing. That sector was relatively safe. But beyond the barriers, it was a different reality. That was Iskaan. That was a minefield turned into a residential neighborhood. According to intel, there were dozens of mined zones in that district before the operation began.
And passing the low say we're
The rest were lying in wait, in alleys, in garbage, under doorsteps. We moved behind Baker Company. Garcia was behind the wheel of our truck again. On the machine gun, Williams. I was infantry. Our task, follow the main force and support them, assist the engineers, clean up the path. We moved with the Iraqi army, police, communications units, dogs, civilian officers. It felt like a giant machine, advancing block by block. We did everything. Wherever there weren't enough troops, we were there. When engineers were needed, we escorted them. When a threat appeared, we stood as a shield. Until we got the call to dismount, I just sat in the back of the truck and waited. And prayed. Sometimes it felt like you weren't a soldier, but a spectator. You weren't acting, you were watching it all unfold. Like a war documentary playing out in front of you. At one sector, we stopped very close to Eagle's Nest, just a few hundred meters away. Right where they used to shoot at us, where battles had been fought over the southern outpost. We walked down Farouk Street. And there, for the first time, I saw the aftermath of that firefight. Walls riddled with bullet holes. A gaping hole in the brickwork, from a tank shell, straight through the wall. I paused for a second, took a photo to remember, and moved on. There was no time for reflection. We were walking a route where militants had been just recently. Then we turned into an alley. Local soldiers led us through narrow streets, past piles of garbage. To our left and right, abandoned houses where traps could still be waiting. As we exited the alley, we stepped out onto Easy Street. Right under the barrels of a heavy machine gun at our OP South. It felt like stepping into the gaze of a mechanical god of war. Windows, slits, armor, all silent, but you knew that the moment anything moved, it would erupt. A woman lived in this district. I remembered her. Her house stood right by the road, across from our position. Every time she crossed the street, she raised a white cloth, as if to say, "Don't shoot, I'm just a civilian." She lived directly on the line of fire. Every trip for bread, a gamble with death. The engineers finished their work and we headed back. Same street, same houses. Everything the same. And then, just as we passed a large pile of trash, someone behind shouted, "Mine!" We bolted back to the armored vehicle, at full speed. As if hell itself was erupting behind us. I lit a cigarette before I could even catch my breath. Later, the engineers told us, in the trash was an aluminum can packed with explosives. It hadn't gone off. By that point, few enemies remained in the city. But those who did were experienced, angry, and willing to do anything. The district was literally saturated with mines. Every corner, every box, every canister could hide death. Clearing streets like that was like walking through a minefield blindfolded. The assault continued. We kept moving from point to point. The engineers had plenty of work, and we covered them. More and more commanders, officers, and sergeants waved us down when they saw our vehicle, as if waiting their turn. Their turn for clearing, for inspection, for EOD support. We rarely left the sector. We only returned to base at night, just to sleep a little and go back into the fight. Time stretched endlessly. One of those days ended with a scene that stuck in my memory. We returned to the truck and found Garcia asleep at the wheel, helmet crooked. One hand on the steering wheel, the other tucked under his flak vest. He slept as if he were back home on his couch, peacefully, without fear. In the middle of war. Kazinya opened the door and tapped on the helmet. "Wake up, Garcia!" "I wasn't sleeping, Sergeant. I was praying." "Then pray harder," I replied, because ahead of us were more mines, more streets, and a new kind of hell. By night, we were used to the routine. Move, stop, clear, engineers, move again. It repeated over and over, sometimes for hours. At times, it felt like we were just driving in circles around the city. But every new place could be the last. After one particularly long and dull stop, we came back to the truck and saw Garcia dozing at the wheel. He was in deep sleep, didn't even hear us approach. His flak vest had slipped, his helmet had shifted, his face looked like a man who was tired of everything. Garcia moved through the war like a ghost. He didn't flinch, didn't show fear, he just existed in this hell, as if it were his normal state of being. Kazinya tapped his helmet again. "Up, Garcia." "I wasn't sleeping, Sergeant. I was praying," he mumbled. I smirked. "We're gonna need that." But during those days, besides responding to mines, we started getting what they called extra tasks. The Army calls it Battle Damage Assessment, BDA. In simpler terms, someone had to confirm that an airstrike actually hit its target. Make sure there were no civilians, record what was left of the objectives. One of those missions stuck with me. An Apache had hit a group of armed men. We were sent to the site to check who exactly it had taken out. Everything looked calm. Too calm. The neighborhood, dead. Not a single person, not a single voice, not a single sound. Just debris, heat, and the realization that you were walking down a street that, just hours earlier, Hinjat had been alive. I saw the body first. A man in a light blue shirt, face down, one arm stretched out, as if he were trying to say something or stop us. Garcia eased around him, stopping just centimeters away. Kazinya stepped out first, then I followed. Looked around. Quiet. Too quiet. This neighborhood was different from the rest of Ramadi. The houses, painted, even nice. Pastel colors, well-kept yards. It looked like a normal suburb, and that made everything feel even more disturbing. On the ground, the dead. Two next to a wrecked motorcycle. Rifles nearby. The Apache didn't miss. When we got closer, we saw a third. He had tried to crawl. Must have been wounded. Didn't make it. His pants were down, underwear filthy. Died like that, in a way no one wants to die. There was nothing dramatic about the scene. Just a body. Just a man who didn't make it in time. I heard someone behind me mutter, "If anyone's gonna die with his pants down in this war, it's probably gonna be me." A joke. A dumb one. But it worked. Laughter. The last shield against what's happening around you. While we were taking photos and documenting the aftermath, one of our guys pointed out, "Hey, Fletch, that dead guy's flipping you off." I turned. And yeah, his hand was outstretched, middle finger pointed skyward. "Fine by me," I said. "His day, not ours." We collected the rifles, snapped the photos, logged the coordinates. The report would be short. Direct hit, no civilian damage, area clear. None of the locals came to claim the bodies. Usually, the fighters would come back for the dead. Not for honor. For propaganda, for graves, for flags. But this time, nothing. No prayers. No stretchers. No funerals. That's how their holy war ended. We stood in silence. Just a few seconds. Then someone let out a loud fart, snickers, sideways glances, and then we moved again. On to the next point. Later, when we reached the edge of the neighborhood, we were directed to a building identified in the intel as a workshop for making IEDs, improvised explosive devices, a potential death factory. Kazinya had just stepped out of the armored vehicle when the explosion hit. 1 second, and everything was covered in dust. The blast came from behind. I jumped out. Amos's vehicle, torn to pieces. Driver's side, smashed. Front wheel, totaled. Everyone spilled out, except Amos himself. He was closest to the blast. Kazinya ran to the cab, yanked the door open. "You alive?" he shouted. "Yeah, Sergeant. I saw you guys running, so I stayed. Figured to hell with it. Get out." Now, Kazinya practically dragged him from the cab. His body was intact, but his face looked like a man who'd just come back from the dead. A column of Marines passed us. First wave of 2-5. They had just arrived in Ramadi. And this is what greets them: a wrecked vehicle, a soldier standing in the dust, and a driver who nearly got blown sky high. Welcome to the city. What happened with that factory? I don't know. We didn't go in. Maybe it was a false alarm. Maybe not. Or maybe the whole point of the mission was for Amos to take the hit and come out of that truck a changed man, with extra scars and extra respect. After that, we stayed behind to guard the wrecked truck, waited for the recovery team, sat there in the heat, guarding a pile of metal that had been a working vehicle just that morning. When we finally moved out, another stop, engineers again, we got stuck in a narrow alley, wall to the left, driver's side pin. If something went wrong, getting out fast would be tough. Moments like that remind you, a passenger in an armored truck isn't a soldier. He's cargo. Everything depends on the driver, the gunner, the vehicle commander. You just sit there and hope. I was supposed to cover the left flank, but the window in the vehicle, tiny. Visibility almost zero. We were boxed in. Knight sat next to me. He'd joined us after the last explosion. Solid guy, but big. Took up a lot of space. If we had to bail out in a hurry, I wouldn't be the first one out. I started complaining. Joking, of course, just to lighten the mood. That was our currency, sarcastic whining. It worked better than armor. "Williams, let's switch seats." "You're my dismount," Kazinya replied. "I just need a smoke." "You can smoke in the truck." "What do you mean?" "Today, it's allowed." "That means we're definitely going to die," Williams remarked. Knight was already smoking, didn't wait for permission. We started moving. Just rolled into the intersection, and then another stop. Another call from the engineers. "Hold position." I lost it. Are they kidding? We're right in the middle of the street. And then, a voice in the headset. Loud. Panicked. "Get out! Get out! Now!" Garcia slammed the pedal. We surged forward, drove just a few meters, and stopped. The engineers told us later they spotted something suspicious right beneath us. When we moved, they opened a hatch in the ground. There was a mine planted underneath. Clean work. A rectangular cut in the concrete. Everything camouflaged on top. They called that type of mine SpongeBob, because the slab looked like it had been neatly lifted and then placed back. No visible signs. If it had been pressure activated, or if the observer had hit the switch in time, we would have been gone. No screams, no reaction time. Everything over in a second. We returned to base. Silent. Even Garcia stood in the chow line like he'd just been pulled from a collapsed building. Covered in dust, helmet crooked. Knight turned to him, and for the first time snapped, "You need to watch where the hell you're driving." It surprised everyone. Knight was usually calm, but this time he cracked. And for good reason. He knew how close we'd been to dying. Too close. Garcia didn't flinch. "I told you. I was praying." "Pray the next time we're not parked on top of a mine," muttered Williams. We ate, stayed quiet, and then rolled out again, into the same dust, the same streets, into the longest night of that war. By the end of Operation Chickamauga, the streets of southern Iskaan looked like a post-bombing zone. Asphalt cratered, buildings half destroyed, courtyards buried in debris and ash. But the most striking part, there were no people. Only bodies? Before, the militants used to recover their dead. It was almost a rule. Even in the worst battles, if one of theirs fell, they'd come at night and take him. It was believed to be the right thing, that it had to be done, that the dead shouldn't be left on the battlefield.
But no one came.
The dead lay in the streets for days. No prayers, no farewells, no hope. You walked down the street not thinking someone might jump out from around a corner. No, you knew it was over. Just not officially announced yet. The remaining fighters in Iskaan, either dead or gone. No reinforcements, no comms, no cover. The noose had closed. They were cut off, squeezed, and finished. We kept going out. Engineers cleared houses, roads, bridges. We escorted them, again and again. Pull up. Stop. Clear. Move on. Everything slow, step by step. There was one area, we jokingly called it Mini Tikrit. Everything looked way too clean there. Freshly painted facades, swept yards, neatly laid tiles. And that's where the most traps were. They had mined even the front steps. Even toilet lids, if the rumors were true. In one house, our guys found mines inside an oven. In another, hidden in a closet. One basement was packed with fuel cans and wires. Someone had been trying to build a full-blown bomb lab. But they didn't finish. We came too soon. Many places had to be cleared by hand. Metal detectors, probes, mirrors. Sometimes, just to get to it. Stay. There were times when a guy would stop just a second before stepping forward, because he sensed something was off. That sixth sense, like an animal's. Those were the ones who survived. Sometimes it felt like the war was over, but it wasn't. As long as mines stayed buried in the ground, the fight continued. As long as someone still feared stepping outside, there was no victory. One evening we stood at a spot that used to be an intersection. Now, just a scorched patch, burned-out vehicles, collapsed buildings, and silence. But not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows a scream. I sat down against a wall, pulled out a pack of cigarettes. Kazina sat nearby, silent, staring at a single point. "You think it's over?" I asked. "It's all here," he pointed to the ground. "But in here," he tapped his temple, "it's going to stay for a long time." We didn't speak anymore. In that moment you realize war doesn't have a final shot. There's no point when you can say, "That's it, it's truly over." Because even when the bullets stop flying, it still rumbles inside you. The next day, the order came. The operation was complete. The Iskaan district had been cleared. The remaining enemy forces eliminated. The territory was being handed over to local police. Officially, a victory. We returned to Kop Corregidor. Our armored vehicle was covered in dust, dents, and scratches. So were we. Some stayed quiet, some smoked, some just sat, staring off into nothing. No one wanted food. No one wanted to talk. Garcia had dozed off at the wheel again. As always, Kazina tapped him on the shoulder. "We're back," he said. "I wasn't sleeping, Sergeant. I was praying." It had become a running joke. But now, it sounded... It's had a different beat on it. Because now we knew he wasn't lying. Iskaan had fallen. The last district held by al-Qaeda in Ramadi no longer belonged to the enemy. A city where every house was a trap, where every corner was a chance to die, was now under control. But the price paid for that couldn't be measured in reports. It stayed in our minds, in our memories, in sleepless nights. It wasn't just a clearing operation. It was closure, an ending. Not a loud one. No fanfare. No parade. Just a fact. The last day of war for that neighborhood. And maybe, for someone, the last day they truly felt alive. Thank you for watching this video until the end. I hope this story gave you something to think about, and helped you feel what people go through in war. No filters, no glory, just the way it is. If you appreciate real, honest stories like this one, support the channel by subscribing. It helps the video reach more people and gives us the chance to share more truths like this. Thank you for your time. See you next time.